Only those with noble lineage belong in this home. My mother-in-law's words lingered in the crisp Hamptons breeze, like invisible poison. I watched her face tighten into that all-too-familiar sneer, one I'd endured for the last 5 years. Beside her, Ethan, my 34-year-old husband, nodded in agreement, his expression an exact reflection of his mother's disdain. "Claire, I think it's best if you go," he said, not even bothering to meet my eyes. But the fury rising inside me felt different this time, not the usual cocktail of shame and sorrow I'd swallowed for years under their constant scorn. No, this was something else. Something sharp. I felt my lips curve into a calm smile as I turned to the discreet security guard stationed by the arched glass doors. "Would you please escort them off my estate property?" The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. Ethan's jaw fell slack, and Margaret's perfectly Botoxed brow actually creased. I watched their eyes flicker toward the polished bronze plaque on the marble wall behind me, the one with the name Mitchell etched in bold. The same name found on every luxury hotel in the Mitchell collection. This can't be," Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her pearls. "You're just some small-town girl from Oregon. Your father was a carpenter." "A carpenter," I said, voice steady, "who invested wisely and built an empire." I studied her, unflinching. "Did you never wonder why I insisted we hold the wedding here? I wanted to give you the chance to accept me for who I am, not what I own." The guard stepped forward, polite and professional. Ethan reached for my arm, but I stepped back smoothly, sliding off my wedding ring in one graceful motion. "As for the grand wedding you're planning for your son and his new flame," I added, noting their guilty glances, "I've got something special in mind for that too." Looking back, I should have seen the signs: secret phone calls, late nights at the office, the slight shifts in Ethan's behavior. But I'd been too busy secretly running my father's hospitality empire, hoping that one day his family would see beyond their bias and accept me. That day, standing in the sunlit lobby of my flagship property in East Hampton, I realized the truth. Some people never change. The real question was, why had I spent so long trying to change myself to please them? As they were ushered out, my phone buzzed. A message from Lena, my trusted assistant. "Everything's in place." They had no idea what they'd just triggered. The carefully constructed castle of elitism and fakery they lived in was about to collapse, and I would be right there, watching it crumble. But first I had a resort to run, and a truth to reveal, one that would shatter the pedestal they'd built beneath themselves. The carpenter's daughter they'd mocked for years was about to teach them a lesson in genuine class. They had no idea this was just the beginning. The wedding they'd been scheming behind my— Oh, it would happen, just not in the way they'd imagined. I had something far more memorable in mind for their perfect day. I stood by the tall windows of my penthouse suite, watching Ethan and Margaret be escorted to their waiting black car. 5 years of pretending to be smaller than I was, because I thought love meant accepting people for who they were. What a fool I'd been. My father's voice echoed in my mind. "Never let anyone make you feel small, Claire. We build more than resorts. We build future." He'd started with nothing but tools and talent, and turned it into a global name in luxury stays through grit and vision. When he passed 3 years ago, I inherited more than his wealth. I inherited his purpose, and starting now I would fulfill. The day I met Ethan at a charity gala in San Francisco, I was 27 and optimistic. I thought I'd found someone who saw me for who I truly was. He was charming, seemingly kind, and appeared genuinely interested in my thoughts and dreams. I didn't tell him about my family's legacy. I wanted to be loved for myself, not for my bank account or brand. What an ironic twist that turned out to be. Miss Mitchell, Lena, my assistant, appeared at the door of my Manhattan home office. "I have those files you requested." I turned from the window, collecting myself. "Show me." She laid out several folders on the desk. Inside were photographs, email transcripts, and detailed bank statements. Evidence, cold and undeniable. Ethan's affair with Vanessa, his mother's not-so-subtle favorite, had been going on for 8 months, and the wedding they were planning behind my back was scheduled for next spring, at this very resort. "They've already placed deposits," Lena said, pointing to transaction receipts under fake client names. "Margaret Blake's been coordinating with her personal wedding planner for weeks." I couldn't help but laugh. The audacity was almost comical. Margaret had always been cunning, I'd give her that, but this time she'd played herself. "Have you spoken to the attorneys?" I asked, still staring at Ethan's smiling face beside Vanessa's in one of the photos. "With the infidelity clause in the prenup, we're in a very strong position legally," Lena said, then hesitated. but they're preparing to challenge your ownership of the Mitchell chain. Margaret's gathering what she calls evidence, claiming your father's original investment came from questionable sources. My blood ran cold. Of course. That explained the recent break-in at our old family property. The random inquiries about my father's early business partner. They weren't just planning to leave me, they were trying to erase me. Erase everything my father built. I walked over to the painting above the fireplace. Behind it, inside a recessed wall safe, was a worn leather journal. My father's, his meticulous handwritten account of every deal, every client, every dollar earned with calloused hands and integrity. He'd always believed the truth needed preserving for moments. Exactly like this. Lena, I said quietly, call Michael at the Times. It's time I give them the interview they've been asking for. The world needed to know how Jonathan Mitchell, a carpenter from Oregon, built one of the most respected hospitality empires in North America. I paused as a new thought began forming. And Lena, I want a full background on Vanessa's family. Every connection, every business tie. Something tells me Ethan and Margaret aren't the only ones hiding secrets. She nodded and left. I sat down and opened the journal, running my fingers along my father's firm script. For so long I'd stayed silent about who I was, believing that humility would earn acceptance, but all it had done was enable their prejudice. My phone buzzed, a message from Ethan, we need to talk. This isn't what you think. Oh, but it was exactly what I thought. And while he and Margaret likely huddled in their overpriced villa scheming their next move, they had no idea what I'd uncovered. The sun set over the Atlantic, turning the sky tangerine and crimson. In one of our coastal resorts, a USB drive rested in a locked drawer, holding information that would make today's revelations feel like gossip. Ethan's so-called noble family had spent generations building a reputation on fiction. But I had the truth. And soon so would the world. First I had a wedding to plan. Not mine, not anymore, but it would be a day no one would forget. One would forget. Each page pulled back another layer of rot. Beneath their polished image, the Blake family facade was cracking, and what it revealed beneath was darker than I imagined. Your father's old partner is on the line, Lena's voice came through the intercom. Walter Green, says it's urgent. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. He was my father's closest friend during the early days before something caused a deep rift. I picked up the phone, heart pounding. Claire, he said, his voice rough and familiar, carrying the scent of backyard barbecues and building plans spread across our kitchen table. I heard about what happened at the resort, he continued. It's time you knew the truth about Ethan's family. And for the next hour I listened, silent, breath shallow, as Walter unraveled a story that sent a chill down my spine. The Blake's noble lineage, a fabrication, it began 3 generations back with Ethan's grandfather. They weren't old money, they were con artists, masters of infiltration. They'd made a legacy out of marrying into wealthy families and slowly bleeding them dry. A web of charm, illusion, and legal manipulation. And now they'd chosen me, but they had picked the wrong woman. Your father figured it out, Walter explained. That's why I left. He wanted to expose them, but I was scared. They had connections, Claire, dangerous ones. I stared out the window, my mind racing. Did they have anything to do with Dad's accident? The silence on the other end of the line stretched painfully. I can't prove it, Walter finally said, his voice raw. But your father was close to blowing their entire operation wide open. The brake failure in his car, too convenient to be coincidence. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop. I pulled up the encrypted file hidden on a drive buried deep in my father's old leather briefcase. He'd kept records, decades of them. Names, photos, marriage certificates, wire transfers, confidential agreement. A cold, brutal timeline of what the Blake family had done to people just like us. 50 years worth of ruined lives, emptied bank accounts, and buried secrets. Why didn't you tell me this before I married Ethan? I asked, struggling to keep the anger from boiling over. Your father made me promise, Walter said with a heavy sigh. He thought you deserved to live freely. He hoped Ethan might be different. I ended the call without saying more. Then I buzzed Lena, get in here. She entered instantly, concern on her face. I need you to contact every bride who's booked our resorts for next year. Offer them a significant upgrade, move them to our sister properties. She blinked. All of them, even the ones in Europe. Yes, I said firmly, and leave the flagship estate in East Hampton empty. For next spring. She tilted her head. For the wedding? Yes, I said slowly, allowing a smile to curl. But not my wedding. I want the Blakes to have exactly what they want. a grand stage for their perfect society spectacle. Then I paused, thinking about the file on my screen, and added, I just want to make sure they get exactly what they deserve. Emily Bennett, Vanessa's younger sister, stood there, looking pale but determined. I know what my sister and Ethan are planning, she blurted out. And I know what happened to the Morrison family, and the Blackwoods. They've been doing this for years. I studied her face. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the first one who's fighting back, she whispered. And I can't let them destroy another person. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. I have recordings, conversations between Ethan and Vanessa. They're not just planning to leave you, they're planning to ruin you. The resorts, your reputation, all of it. I took the phone and played the first file. Ethan's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. Calculated, precise. They were going to frame me for financial fraud, forge documents, redirect funds to an offshore account and pin the embezzlement on me. It was worse than betrayal. It was a targeted takedown. When the final recording ended, I looked up at Emily. Thank you. This changes everything. That evening, as the sun dipped below the ocean's edge, I received another message. This time from Ethan. Let's handle this like adults. Dinner tomorrow, just you and me. I received another message. This time from Ethan. Let's handle this like adults. Dinner tomorrow, just you and me. I replied with 3 words. What Ethan didn't know was that the Blue Room, our most elite and discreet dining space, had been my father's favorite place to close deals and expose frauds. Each table in that restaurant had built-in audio and video surveillance, originally for protecting our high-profile guests from espionage. Tomorrow night, Ethan would walk into that same trap completely unaware. This time I would be the one in control. This time, I would be the one in control. Later, as I readied for bed, a final message lit up my phone. Blocked number. Be careful. They've done this before. The last woman didn't survive to tell the tale. My chest tightened. This wasn't just about preserving a business anymore. It was about staying alive. The Blue Room was silent the next evening, just as I'd arranged. I'd cleared out all guests. The only people present were staff I'd personally vetted and trusted for years. Ethan arrived right on time. Right sharp. He wore the navy suit I'd given him for our 2nd anniversary. The irony nearly made me laugh. Claire, he said with a smile that once made my heart skip. You look beautiful. I wore my mother's black dress. Simple, elegant and powerful. A symbol of real family. Let's skip the pleasantries, I said, sitting down. We both know why we're here. He ordered the most expensive bottle on the menu, my wine from my vineyard, and leaned back casually. This whole thing's gotten out of hand, he said. You've always been emotional, darling, but this dramatic performance, it's beneath you. I thought of the recording, Walter's warning, my father's death. I wrapped my fingers around my glass, but kept my voice even. Tell me about the Morrison family. His left eye twitched, subtle. But there, I don't know what you're talking about. Elizabeth Morrison, I said clearly, aged, inherited a hotel chain, married your uncle, Leonard Blake, lost everything in under a year, her car found at the bottom of a cliff. He waved his hand. Ancient family history, and irrelevant to us. But I saw it, his knuckles whitening around his glass. Then let's talk about something more recent, I said, voice calm but cutting, like the prenup your mother's lawyers are scrambling to invalidate, or the forged documents you've been preparing to frame me for embezzlement. This time, Ethan's mask cracked. Our eyes locked across the candlelit table, and for the first time I saw him clearly, not the charming man I'd once loved, but someone far colder, calculating, and dangerous. You've been busy, he murmured, swirling the wine in his glass. But Claire, you're playing a game you don't understand. Some things are better left alone. Like my father's accident, I asked, letting the question linger. Ethan took a slow, deliberate sip, watching me over the rim of the crystal glass. Accidents happen in construction. He knew the risks, but he knew other things too. About your family, about what happened to the real Blakes. That got his attention. What are you talking about, he asked, the feigned ignorance already cracking. I reached into my purse, and pulled out the yellowed photograph. A group of people stood before a grand stone mansion, faces from another era. Your grandfather isn't in this photo, Ethan, I said, laying it on the table. But the real Charles Blake is the man whose identity your grandfather stole after the fire that conveniently killed the rest of the family. His face turned gray. Where did you get that? My father was thorough. He believed in knowing exactly who he was dealing with, I said even. He also believed in backups. Lots of them, hidden in places your family would never think to look. The waiter appeared with appetizers, but Ethan didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the photo, hands rigid. "What do you want?" he finally asked, voice strained. "I want you to understand something," I said, leaning forward slightly. "Every forged document, every lie, every plan you and Vanessa concocted, I have proof of it all. It's all safely stored. And if anything happens to me, even a flat tire, it all goes public." "You're bluffing," he whispered, but his tone lacked conviction. I picked up my phone and tapped play. A short recording filled the air, his own voice discussing the plan to funnel funds from Mitchell Resorts to offshore accounts. Ethan turned ash. "That's just a sample," I said, silencing the clip. "There's hours more. Your mother's role, Vanessa's, everything." He sat back silent. "So here's how this ends," I continued. "You're going to sign the divorce papers my attorneys have prepared. You're going to take your mother and Vanessa and leave. Not just the estate, the country. And if I don't," I gave him a long cold stare, "then I finish what my father started. Every scam, every forged marriage, every suspicious death. I bring it all to light. How long do you think your noble family survives once the truth comes out?" The look he gave me was pure hatred. "You don't know what you're doing," he hissed. "There are people involved in this who won't hesitate to what? Stage another accident." I smiled razor thin. "Do you really think I haven't taken precautions?" Just then my phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "They're in position. Everything is ready." I stood adjusting the hem of my mother's dress. "One more thing, Ethan," I said, gesturing toward the panoramic window. He turned. Down in the lot below, a line of unmarked police vehicles rolled in silently. Officers stepped out, dispersing into tactical formation. "Insurance," I said coolly, "and the authorities are very interested in some new evidence about Charlotte Hayes's case." He turned sharply. "You know, Ethan, you never noticed who I truly was. I'm not just a woman you could charm and betray. I'm a businesswoman." I turned for the door, then paused. "Oh, and the wedding you and Vanessa were planning? Don't worry, the venue's still yours. In fact, I insist. I have something very special planned for the occasion." As I walked out of the blue room, I heard him call my name. I didn't turn around. Let him wonder what I had planned. Let him worry what else I knew. Because the truth was, I was just getting started. Wanted K. I barely slept that night. Adrenaline from the confrontations surged through my veins. Every threat, every flicker in Ethan's expression replayed over and over. At dawn I was already in my office, reviewing the security footage from the blue room. Something about his reaction when I mentioned Charlotte Hayes, formerly Elizabeth Morrison, stuck with me. "Mrs. Mitchell." Lena's voice came over the intercom. "Detective Quinn is here." I'd been expecting her. Detective Harper Quinn stepped into my office. Her face drawn with exhaustion but her eyes alert. She'd been digging into cold cases tied to elite families for over a decade. I reviewed the blue room footage. She said, lowering herself into the chair across from me. "But it's what we found in Charlotte's old car that really matters." I leaned forward. "What did you find?" "The same type of brake line damage as your father's truck. Nearly identical. But this time we found a trace substance that wasn't available back when the original investigation took place." She turned her tablet toward me, displaying the images. "It proves the brakes were deliberately cut." My stomach twisted. "Can you prove who did it?" I asked. "Not yet," she said. Her phone buzzed and she glanced at the screen. Then her face went pale. "We need to move you to a secure location. Now." "What is it?" "Leonard Blake. The one who married Charlotte and went into house arrest. He just escaped custody. And your mother-in-law Margaret was spotted visiting him yesterday." A chill ran down my spine. Walter Green's warnings about dangerous connections suddenly felt less like paranoia and more like prophecy. Within hours, I was relocated to a secure suite at one of my properties in Aspen, surrounded by round-the-clock private security. Lena had already arranged for all resort operations to continue seamlessly in my absence, delegating key tasks to our regional managers. But something still felt off. Then my phone rang. Emily Bennett, Vanessa's younger sister, my unexpected ally in all this, sounded breathless. "Claire, thank God you're safe. They're planning something," she said in a rush. I overheard Vanessa on the phone with Margaret. They mentioned a backup plan. Something about the resort's opening celebration next month. I froze. "The gala?" I whispered. "Our annual grand event. The biggest of the year. Hundreds of VIPs. International press. Celebrities. And the governor." I finished quietly. The governor always attends, Emily confirmed, her voice hushed. But Claire, there's more. She hesitated. Then with visible unease she continued. I found old photos, in our attic, of my father and Ethan's uncle, Leonard Blake, together, from nearly 20 years ago. My breath caught. I don't think my sister's relationship with Ethan was ever random, Emily whispered. I think our families have been working together for generations. It clicked. Suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't about revenge, or even greed, not entirely. This was about legacy theft, political control, social dominance. They weren't just targeting me or the resorts. They were weaving themselves into powerful bloodlines, consolidating control behind the scenes, generation after generation. I yanked my laptop open and pulled up the guest list for the gala. Among the RSVPs, 3 senators, 2 tech billionaires, a former head of intelligence, 12 Forbes-listed heirs and heiresses. It was a playground for predators like the Blakes and Bennetts. A hunting ground masked in velvet. Emily, I need you to send me those photos right now, I said firmly. And anything you can remember. Anything about conversations your parents had with the Blakes. As I hung up, Lena burst into the room holding a tablet. Claire, you need to see this. I took it. A news article had just gone live. The headline made my stomach drop. Questions arise about Mitchell Resort Empire origins. Sources suggest illicit foundations. I scanned the article quickly. Anonymous tips. Alleged offshore funds. Claims of investor fraud. They were moving fast, but they'd made a mistake. A fatal one. The leaked documents included details about Charlotte Hayes's disappearance. Details that had never been public. Only someone involved in her case could have known them. I picked up my phone and dialed Detective Harper Quinn. I need a warrant, I said without preamble. I know where you'll find proof of who killed Charlotte Hayes. A pause. The Lancaster estate, she asked. No, I said, my voice low and certain. Check the Bennett family home. That's where the real mastermind has been hiding all along. Detective Quinn was silent. Then, I'll get it done. I ended the call and turned to Lena. Contact every media outlet that ran this hit piece, I said. Tell them I'm doing an exclusive interview. Tomorrow. She blinked. You're going to address it head on. We're not just addressing it, I said, pulling up the seating chart for the gala. We're flipping it. I highlighted the tables closest to the stage and smiled. Make sure the Blakes and Bennetts get the best seats in the house, right where everyone can see them. As night fell, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my secure suite, watching Aspen's glittering cityscape shimmer in the snow. Tomorrow I would begin dismantling the carefully polished illusion the Blakes had built for decades. But tonight, there was one more call I had to make. I dialed a number I'd memorized long ago, but never dared to use. 3 rings. Then an answer. Hello? Her voice was older now, but still strong. Elizabeth? There was a pause. Then, Claire? Yes. It's time, I said. Time to come out of hiding. There's a story the world needs to hear and you're the only one who can tell it. The pieces were falling into place. Very soon, justice would be served. Not just for me, but for every family the Blakes had ever deceived. For every woman they'd ruined. Every legacy they'd tried to rewrite. But first I had a gala to plan. And this time I would make sure it was an event no one would ever forget. The morning of the interview, I sat in my father's old study, now my own office, surrounded by decades of history. The morning of the interview, I sat in my father's old study, now my own office surrounded by decades of history. The walls behind me displayed photographs chronicling our family's genuine rise, from a modest carpentry shop in Bend, Oregon, to a globally respected resort empire built on integrity, not inheritance. On the desk in front of me were the documents Charlotte Hayes had sent overnight. After faking her death and escaping her abusive marriage to Leonard Blake, Ethan's uncle, she'd spent nearly a decade gathering evidence. Names, dates, photos, forged agreements. Enough to unravel a network of lies that spanned generations. It was all about to go public. 5 minutes until we go live, the producer said, adjusting my microphone. I nodded. No fear, no nerves, just purpose. And we're live in 3, 2, 1. Recent allegations have surfaced questioning the origins of your family's business. How do you respond? I smiled, calm, steady. I'm glad you asked, I said. Because today I'm not just defending my family's legacy. I'm exposing a decades-long conspiracy that has victimized some of the wealthiest and most vulnerable families in this country. For the next hour I laid out the truth. The mysterious house fire that killed the real Blake family. The stolen identity of Charles Blake by Ethan's grandfather. The string of strategic marriages that ended in accidents or financial devastation. Behind the scenes, Lena coordinated with news outlets across the globe, releasing the verified documents in real time. Financial record photos, confessions, legal contracts. Then came the moment we hadn't announced in advance. I'd like to introduce someone, I said, turning slightly. Someone with a story only she can tell. From off-camera, Charlotte Hayes walked into frame, alive, and holding a thick folder that would send shockwaves through the nation. The interviewer faltered. This wasn't scripted, but I let it unfold. Sometimes the truth doesn't follow a schedule. Charlotte went on to recount her nightmare. How Leonard had charmed her, married her, then slowly cut her off from her own company. How the Blakes had tried to replicate the scheme with me, and how they'd failed because this time the target had teeth. Claire saw through them, she said, glancing at me with quiet admiration, because she understands what real success looks like. It looks like her father's hands calloused from real work. It looks like building people, not using them. Using them. Using them. I didn't react on camera, but inside I felt years of weight begin to lift. After the interview ended, Lena rushed in. The story's gone global, top of every major outlet. And the arrests? I asked. Margaret tried to flee. She was intercepted at a private airstrip. Vanessa's parents are in custody. I took a deep breath. But Ethan and Vanessa, still at large, Lena admitted. I looked toward the window. The sun was beginning to dip behind the peaks. The gala? I asked. Everything's ready. Exactly as you instruct, including the special seating. Good. They wouldn't be able to resist. One last grasp at power. One final appearance to reclaim the narrative. They'd see it as a way to salvage their reputation. But it was a trap. And when they arrived, they'd walk straight into it. I know, I said quietly, thinking of the evidence Detective Quinn had uncovered in the Bennett home. But he also taught me something else. How to play the long game. The Blakes thought they were patient. They took months, sometimes years, to infiltrate family. But I'd waited 5 years. Learned everything about them. Built a network of allies and victims. Collected every piece of truth they tried to bury. And now we waited. Ethan and Vanessa don't know it yet. I said, a slow fire rising in my chest. But they've already RSVP'd to their own downfall. Charlotte smiled. So, she said, what's next? I turned toward her, my voice calm and resolute. We host the most unforgettable gala the world has ever seen. My phone buzzed again. Emily with another update. They took the bait. Just overheard Vanessa telling her friend she plans to make a dramatic entrance at the gala. Says she has something that will destroy you once and for all. I smiled. Perfect. She had no idea the surprises we had waiting. That evening, as I reviewed the final gala preparations, a thought struck me. The Blake family had spent generations perfecting the art of destroying families through marriage. How poetic that their downfall would unfold at what they believed was their greatest triumph. Another high society celebration, a gathering of wealth, power and evidence. But there was one final move to make. I picked up my phone and dialed. Governor. Yes, it's Claire Mitch. I need to adjust your security team's protocol for the gala. There's something you need to know about a few of your fellow guests. Then you need to know about a few of your fellow guests. The trap was set. Now all we had to do was wait for our guests of dishonor to arrive. The trap was set. Now all we had to do was wait for our guests of dishonor to arrive. Everything had been orchestrated with care. The champagne flowed in vintage flutes. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Every floral arrangement matched the sapphire and ivory motif. Timeless elegance masking strategic intent. I stood at the top of the sweeping staircase, observing the scene below like a chess master surveying the board. Lena appeared at my elbow. Security teams are in position. The governor's people are coordinating with Detective Quinn. Still no sign of Ethan or Vanessa. I nodded, smoothing the deep blue fabric of my gown. The color of dawn. My father's favorite hour. He used to say that was when the most important decisions should be made. When the world was quiet and full of possibility. Another text came in. Lena read it before I had to ask. Emily says Vanessa's getting dressed. At their family estate she's wearing white. Of course she was. The woman who helped destroy my marriage wearing the color of innocence to its funeral. And Eunice says Vanessa's getting dressed. At their family estate, she's. Just then the governor arrived, flanked by his security detail. He gave me a subtle nod as we shook hands. He hadn't wanted to believe me when I first showed him the file. The Blakes and Bennetts had manipulated state-level policies for years, quietly pressuring politicians, redirecting funds and gaining access through blackmail and social influence. But now he understood. Everything in place, he asked under his breath. Just waiting for our honored guests, I replied, meeting his gaze. Then Eunice, dressed to impress billionaires, tech moguls, influencers and royals mingled among curated floral walls and projection-mapped skylines. In the corner, Charlotte Hayes, disguised beneath a silver wig and light makeup, stood near the entrance. She'd insisted on being here tonight. She wanted to see the family that had once tried to destroy her finally face justice. And then at precisely 9:00 p.m., a ripple moved through the crowd like a sudden breeze. They had arrived. Then Eunice, Ethan and Vanessa, she in white, undeniably couture, the kind of dress meant to command attention, he in a crisp black tuxedo, projecting the image of timeless power and control. They paused at the top of the staircase, ready to descend like royalty, but instead of gasps and flashes, they were met with silence. The other guests, previously briefed, ignored them entirely. They kept their champagne-filled conversations going. It was the worst thing you could do to people like Ethan and Vanessa, who thrived on spectacle. They faltered slightly but continued into the crowd. I watched them closely as they moved. Vanessa clutched her sparkling clutch tighter than necessary. Inside, according to Emily, were the documents they thought would bury me. Fabricated proof that my father had built his empire on fraud. They didn't know we had already traced those documents back to Vanessa's father's private server. They're heading for the governor, Lena whispered from behind me. Right on schedule. I moved through the crowd with ease, intercepting them just as they reached his circle. In Eunice, Vanessa, I said warmly, my voice just loud enough for nearby guests to catch. How lovely to see you both. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Vanessa flashed a too bright smile. Claire, she purred. We were just hoping to speak with the governor. I asked innocently. Of course you were. I turned slightly, signaling to one of the undercover agents stationed nearby. Guests began to glance over now. Curious. The attention Vanessa had craved was finally beginning to gather. But not in the way she'd imagined. Claire, Ethan said with that rehearsed smirk, as if none of this were slipping through his fingers. Quite a gathering you've managed, though perhaps not for much longer. Beside him, Vanessa stepped forward, her smile razor-sharp. We thought it was time everyone knew the truth about the Mitchell empire, she said, voice dripping with false confidence. About where the money really came from. I raised an eyebrow. The truth? What an excellent idea. I turned to face the ballroom, my voice clear, unwavering. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention please? The music faded instantly. All eyes turned to us. Many of you have read recent stories questioning the origins of my family's business. I began. Tonight I'd like to share the real story, not just of the Mitchells, but of the Blakes. I paused, letting the tension rise, then turned slowly to Vanessa. And of the Bennetts, a family whose quiet influence has shaped one of the longest-running conspiracies in modern high society. Vanessa's smile faltered. Ethan moved, attempting to grab my arm, maybe to silence me, maybe to feign control. But before he could make contact, two security guards appeared like shadows, blocking him. You see, I continued, this evening isn't just a celebration, it's an ending, and a beginning. I gave Lena the nod. She tapped a small device, and the ballroom's hidden screens came to life. Years of buried secrets flooded the room, decades of evidence, collected piece by piece. Photographs of forged marriage licenses, wire transfers from stolen accounts, confidential emails, surveillance stills, and then, the bombshell. A video, time-stamped just hours earlier. Vanessa's father, face pale and drawn, sat across from Detective Harper Quinn, confessing everything, names, locations, victims. No, Vanessa whispered, her face going ghost white. That's not, he wouldn't. He was very cooperative, I said quietly. Once we found the hidden vault beneath your family's estate, the one containing trophies from every family you've ruined. I turned slightly, meeting Ethan's gaze, including the piece of brake line from my father's truck. Ethan lunged at me, but he didn't get far. The governor's security team intercepted him with mechanical precision. Then out of the crowd, stepped Detective Quinn, badge in hand. Ethan Blake, or should I say Ethan Whitmore, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, accessory to murder, and a growing list of federal charges. Vanessa tried to flee, but two plainclothes agents flanked her. As they were cuffed and led away, gasps filled the ballroom, a murmur of confusion, shock, then scattered applause, but I didn't hear any of it. My eyes were fixed on the giant screen behind the stage, where an image of my father had appeared. His kind eyes, his weather-worn hands, the quiet pride in his smile. He built this empire with sweat and vision. I exhaled, feeling both light and unbearably heavy all at once. Once, as Ethan and Vanessa were escorted out, Charlotte Hayes approached, her silver wig slightly askew, her expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. She held a worn leather portfolio. "Your father gave this to me for safekeeping," she said quietly. "He made me promise to give it to you only after the Blakes were exposed." She hesitated. "There's something you need to know about your mother." I blinked. "My mother, she died when I was a baby," I murmured. "Or so I've always been told." My father never spoke much of her. Charlotte gently rested the portfolio in my hands. "There's more," she said. "But not here." She glanced around at the guests, still buzzing from the revelation. "Come with me." We slipped away to my private office. Lena and Detective Quinn were already waiting. The detective's face was somber. "We found something else," she said. "During the search of the Bennett estate, something about your mother's." My hands shook as I opened the portfolio. Inside, dozens of letters, each written in the same elegant looping handwriting, each signed with a name I hadn't seen in years, but somehow still recognized. My throat closed. They were dated after her supposed death. "She's alive," I whispered, barely able to say it. Charlotte nodded. "She was working with your father to expose the Blakes and Bennetts. She discovered their links to a series of accidents targeting wealthy heirs. But when they found out she was investigating them, they threatened her," Quinn said softly, picking up. "Threatened you, your father. She didn't have a choice. She staged her own death," Charlotte finished, eyes glassy. "To protect you, to go underground, and continue the work. In secret. Secret. She staged her own death," Charlotte finished. I sank into the chair, the letters spread before me like pieces of a life I never knew. All those years of silence, all the things Dad never said. It hadn't been grief that weighed him down. It was protection, a wall of secrets, meant to shield me, and all this time she'd been out there, watching, waiting, fighting. I sank into my chair, the letters scattered across my desk like whispers from a life that had been hidden in plain sight. "All these years your father knew," Charlotte said gently, her voice full of sorrow and admiration. "He had to maintain the deception to keep you both safe. But he never stopped trying to bring down the people who took her from you. That's why they killed him," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "He got too close." Lena stepped forward, a tablet in her hands. Her expression was unreadable. "There's more," she said. "The evidence we found tonight. It goes beyond the Blakes and the Bennett. There's a whole network of families, coordinated, generational, operating across the country." My pulse quickened. "Your mother," Lena added, "has been helping other victims escape, building legal cases, gathering proof. All this time." My mind began to spin, connecting the dots that had been there my whole life. The late-night phone calls my father took behind closed doors, the business trips that always came after someone in the community went missing or suffered a mysterious loss. The way he taught me to always have a backup plan, as if he knew the world we lived in could collapse at any moment. I swallowed hard. "Where is she?" Detective Quinn typed something quickly, then turned her laptop toward me. The screen flickered to life and there she was. Older but unmistakable, those same kind steady eyes I remembered from the faded photographs tucked into old albums. Her smile trembled with emotion. "Claire," she said, her voice breaking. "My brave, brilliant girl. I've watched you from afar for so long, watched you grow into this incredible woman. I never stopped loving you, never stopped believing this day would come." Tears streamed down my face as I reached for the screen. "Mom," I whispered, "I have so many questions. And I'll answer every one," she promised, her smile soft and full of longing. "But now that it's safe, now that you've finished what your father and I started, I'm coming home." A quiet knock interrupted. Emily stood at the doorway, her face pale with urgency. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, "but there's something you need to see." "What is it?" "It's Vanessa. She left something on her phone. The police just recovered it. A video confession, but not about what we expected." She looked at me, her voice trembling. "It's about another family, another target. Someone here, tonight." She thought. She nodded, her eyes full of calm understanding. "Do what needs to be done. I'll be right here when you're finished. We have all the time in the world now." I closed the laptop slowly and stood. I felt different. Lighter. Stronger. The truth about my mother hadn't erased the pain of the past, but it had given it meaning. Every betrayal, every scar, every lesson, it had all been leading here to this moment, to finishing what they started, to protecting someone else. She nodded, her eyes full of calm understanding. Did not her samom, to finishing what they started, to protecting someone else. The last piece of unfinished business now had a deadline, and it was moving fast. As Emily and I hurried back through the corridor, heels clicking over polished stone, I turned to her. Tell me everything. Her next words made me stop mid-stride. This isn't just another wealthy family, Claire, she said, breath-catching. It's bigger. Who are they targeting? She looked up, eyes wide with fear. Amanda Chen. My stomach dropped. Amanda, I repeated. She nodded. The heir to the Celestial Group, the hotel chain in Singapore. Her father just signed over controlling interest to her last month. My breath caught. If the Blakes had succeeded, they would have gained influence in Asia's fastest-growing luxury market, and the Chen family's global diplomatic ties. Where is she now? I demanded. She's still in the ballroom, Emily said, glancing at her phone, dancing. She has no idea, she thought, just feet away from the people who had marked her for destruction. The Bennetts had already prepared their next perfect match. Vanessa's cousin, a lawyer, educated in Europe, attractive, clean record, he was already there, already watching Amanda. The story was repeating itself again, but this time the ending would be different. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, then you've done what your mother and I couldn't. You've exposed the truth. I know what it's cost you, the betrayal, the isolation, the heartbreak. I wish I could have spared you all of it, but you've always been stronger than I gave you credit for. Like your mother, you carry a steel core beneath a gentle heart. That's why I left you the resort empire without the full truth. I had to trust that you would find your own path. If Ethan proved different from his family, you might have had peace. If not, I knew you'd uncover the truth and face it. Your mother didn't die in that accident, Claire. She disappeared to protect us. Together we began building something bigger than hotel. Each resort expansion, each acquisition was part of a larger plan, a network of safe havens. Each Mitchell property has hidden protocols, known only to a select few, secret evacuation routes, encryption systems, emergency contacts. They were never just businesses, they were sanctuaries, and your mother's been running them from the shadows. Now it's your turn to step into the light. I'm sorry I won't be there to see your reunion, but know this, everything I did for you, for her, for the countless lives you'll now touch, the allies you've found, the victims you've saved. They were waiting for you to be ready. Be strong, be free, be happy. All my love, Dad. She thought. I took a deep breath, folding the letter carefully and slipped it into my evening bag. She thought. My mother stood in the doorway, framed by the golden light of the hallway, looking exactly as she had on the video call, except now, she was here, real, alive. For a long moment we just stared at each other. 20 years of separation hung in the air between us like suspended breath. Then she opened her arms, and I ran to her like the child I once was, collapsing into her embrace. She smelled like jasmine and safety and home. She smelled like jasmine and safety and home. She thought. She smelled like jasmine and safety and home. She thought. Later that night, long after the last guest had gone and the ballroom had returned to silence, my mother and I sat together in my father's old office. Our office now. We spread out the plans across the large oak desk. The Mitchell Resort empire would continue, but now it had a new mission, to serve as a global sanctuary network for people trapped in elite schemes, silenced by power, or targeted for their wealth. Charlotte Hayes would stay on board to help identify victims. We'd build something that couldn't be bought, sold, or infiltrated, a legacy not of luxury but of protection and justice. She thought. I looked around the office to the photo of my father on the wall, to the lights of the resort twinkling like stars below us, and finally to the incredible woman beside me who had sacrificed everything to protect her family. I thought of all the other families we could help, all the lives we could still save. I reached for her hand. Yes, I said softly, I'm ready. She thought. The carpenter's daughter hadn't just protected her father's legacy, she transformed it into something greater than anyone could have imagined. And this time she wasn't standing alone.